What's your they had no idea who I was moment? I was 19, working the night shift at a gas station in the worst part of town. Baggy hoodie, messy hair, thick glasses. I looked like every other broke college kid trying to survive on minimum wage. The kind of person most people don't even see. That's exactly what I was counting on. See, while everyone assumed I was just another deadbeat, I was actually in my third year of computer science at MIT, home for winter break, picking up shifts to help my mom with rent. But more importantly, I'd been tracking a human trafficking ring that operated through local businesses. For 6 months, I'd been documenting everything. License plates, faces, times, patterns. 3 girls from my high school had vanished in the past year. The police called them runaways. I knew better. The gas station was their hub. Every Tuesday and Friday between 2 and 4 a.m., black SUVs would pull up. Men in expensive suits would meet with my manager, Vincent, in the back office. Vincent thought I was too stupid to notice the cash transactions, the hushed conversations, the way certain customers paid with burner phones instead of cards. I'd installed hidden cameras in the stockroom, recorded every conversation, built an encrypted database linking the operation to 6 other businesses across 3 states. I even created fake social media profiles to track their associates and map their network connections. That night, everything changed. Vincent was in the back office with 2 men I'd never seen before. One was clearly in charge. Silver hair, cold eyes, tailored suit that probably cost more than my mom made in 6 months. The other looked like muscle, with scars across his knuckles and dead eyes. I pretended to stock shelves while listening through the thin wall, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they could hear it. "The kid's becoming a problem," Vincent said. "She's been asking questions." My blood froze. They were talking about Destiny, a 16-year-old who'd been working there part-time. She'd missed 3 shifts this week, and her last text to me had been strange. Just everything's fine, with no punctuation, which wasn't like her at all. "Handle it," the silver-haired man said. "Tonight. Make it clean." That's when I heard footsteps. Vincent was walking toward the front counter where I stood, trying to look busy, arranging candy bars with trembling hands. "Hey," he called out. "I need you to do me a favor." I turned around, playing dumb. "What's up?" "I need you to deliver something to an address across town. Take my car." He handed me keys and a manila envelope. The address was for a warehouse I'd been monitoring, one of their processing locations. The envelope felt heavy, and I could see the outline of what looked like cash bundles. "What is it?" I asked, maintaining my clueless persona. "Just paperwork. But here's the thing." His voice dropped, and I could smell the cigarettes and cheap cologne. "If anyone asks, you never worked here. You don't know me. Understand?" I nodded, hands trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from adrenaline, because Vincent had just made a fatal mistake. He assumed I was too young, too naive, too powerless to matter. He had no idea I'd been building a case that would bring down his entire operation. He had no idea that every conversation in that back office had been recorded on devices I'd built myself. He had no idea that while he was talking, I'd already sent encrypted files to the FBI, my computer science professor who had federal contacts, and 3 different news outlets. And he definitely had no idea that the delivery he was sending me on was about to become the final piece of evidence they needed. As I walked toward his car, I pulled out my phone and activated the emergency protocol I'd programmed months ago. GPS tracking, automatic evidence upload, emergency contacts, everything I'd spent weeks perfecting. But first, I had to save Destiny, and I had less than an hour before they realized I wasn't just some disposable college kid. The whole thing had started 8 months earlier, when my childhood friend Cassie disappeared. Cassie was 17, worked at a diner downtown, and was saving money for community college. She'd been excited about finally getting her life together after aging out of foster care. Then one day, she just vanished. No note, no goodbye, nothing. The police filed a missing person report and basically shrugged. Another runaway from the system. Case closed. But I knew Cassie. She wouldn't just leave without telling me. We'd been friends since middle school, bonded over being the weird kids nobody else understood. She was planning to study psychology, wanted to help other foster kids. She had dreams. I started digging. Cassie's last known whereabouts were near a cluster of businesses downtown. A massage parlor, a used car lot, and a 24-hour laundromat. All owned by the same shell company. All cash-heavy operations with minimal paper trails. That's when I first noticed the pattern. Late-night meetings between well-dressed men and business owners. Cash transactions. Young women who worked at these places for a few weeks, then disappeared. No forwarding addresses, no social media updates. Just gone. I spent my Christmas break that year learning everything I could about human trafficking. The statistics were horrifying. 300,000 children at risk in the US alone. Average age of entry, 14. Most victims recruited from vulnerable populations. Runaways, foster kids, anyone without strong family connections. Kids like Cassie. By the time I returned to MIT for spring semester, I'd made a decision. If the police wouldn't investigate, I would. I started with social engineering, created fake profiles on social media, posed as a college student interested in easy money. Within weeks, I'd identified several recruiters operating through seemingly innocent job postings, modeling opportunities for young women, traveling companions needed, waitressing positions, no experience necessary, all leading to the same network of businesses. During summer break, I got a job at the gas station. Vincent hired me on the spot, probably because I looked harmless and desperate. Perfect qualities for someone he could exploit. What Vincent didn't know was that I'd already hacked into his personal computer and mapped his entire operation. The gas station was just the front. The real business happened in the back office, where Vincent coordinated with transporters, managed finances, and communicated with buyers in other states. I documented everything, every transaction, every phone call, every visitor. I built a comprehensive database linking the gas station to 17 other businesses across a 4-state area. I identified the key players, mapped their hierarchies, and tracked their financial flows. I also discovered something that made my blood run cold. Vincent kept detailed records of every girl who'd been processed through his operation: names, ages, physical descriptions, and destinations. There were 43 entries over the past 2 years. Cassie was number 7. According to Vincent's files, she'd been transported to a location in Nevada 3 days after she disappeared. The buyer was listed as Desert Rose Entertainment, a front company for a brothel operating near Las Vegas. I spent the next month building an identity for myself within the criminal network. I posed as a potential buyer, used sophisticated voice-changing software to make calls, and slowly infiltrated their communication channels. What I found was beyond anything I'd imagined. This wasn't just a local operation. It was part of a network spanning 12 states, with connections to international trafficking routes. They moved hundreds of women and children annually, generating millions in revenue, and they were completely invisible to law enforcement. These weren't stereotypical criminals operating from dark alleys. They were businessmen with expensive suits and legitimate front companies. They paid taxes, donated to charities, and attended city council meetings. They hid in plain sight. That's when I realized something crucial. To catch them, I needed to be equally invisible. So I perfected my cover. I became the forgettable gas station clerk. I asked no questions, showed no curiosity, and acted slightly slow when Vincent gave me instructions. I let him think I was barely capable of operating the cash register. Meanwhile, I was documenting every aspect of his operation. I installed micro cameras throughout the building. I placed GPS trackers on vehicles used for transportation. I intercepted and recorded phone calls. I even gained access to Vincent's financial accounts and tracked money flows in real time. But I needed more than evidence. I needed to catch them in the act. That's where Destiny came in. Destiny was 16, recently emancipated from foster care, and working part-time to pay for her GED classes. She was exactly the type of vulnerable target Vincent typically recruited. I watched him groom her over several weeks. First, he offered extra shifts and cash bonuses. Then he started asking personal questions about her living situation and financial struggles. Finally, he began introducing her to friends who could offer better opportunities. I wanted to warn her, but I couldn't risk blowing my cover. Instead, I tried to document everything, hoping I could build enough evidence to save her before it was too late. But Vincent moved faster than I anticipated. 3 days before the confrontation in the back office, Destiny had been asking questions about some of the late-night visitors. She'd noticed the pattern of well-dressed men meeting with Vincent after hours and had innocently asked if they were corporate inspectors. Vincent told her they were investors interested in expanding the gas station business, but I could see the concern in his eyes. Destiny was becoming aware of things she shouldn't know about. That's when I knew she was in immediate danger. I accelerated my timeline. I finished compiling all my evidence and created multiple backup copies stored in secure cloud servers. I established contact protocols with law enforcement and prepared emergency response systems. I also started carrying a taser. The night of the confrontation, everything came together exactly as I'd predicted. Vincent received a call from his higher-ups. Someone had noticed Destiny's questions and decided she was a liability. They wanted her handled permanently. As I listened to Vincent discuss Destiny's fate with the 2 men in his office, I realized this was my moment. If I waited any longer, Destiny would disappear like Cassie and 41 other girls. When Vincent handed me the keys to his car and the manila envelope, I knew exactly what was happening. The envelope contained payment for Destiny's elimination. The warehouse address was where they planned to dispose of her body. And Vincent was using me as an unwitting courier to complete the transaction. But Vincent had made one critical miscalculation. He thought he was sending a naive college kid to deliver a package. Instead, he was handing his entire operation to someone who'd been systematically dismantling it for months. The drive to the warehouse took 15 minutes. I used every second to finalize my emergency protocols. First, I activated the GPS tracking system I'd installed on Vincent's car. Law enforcement would be able to follow my location in real time. Second, I triggered the automated evidence upload. Every file, recording, and document I'd collected over the past 6 months was simultaneously transmitted to the FBI, the state police, the local district attorney's office, and 3 investigative journalists. Third, I sent encrypted messages to my computer science professor, Dr. Rahman, who had connections with federal law enforcement. I'd been updating him on my investigation for weeks, though he'd insisted I leave the actual intervention to professionals. Finally, I called Agent Morrison. I'd been feeding information to the FBI's trafficking task force for months through an encrypted tip line using the codename Phoenix. They'd been trying to identify me, but I'd maintained operational security. Tonight, that would change. Agent Morrison, this is Phoenix. It's happening tonight. I'm at the warehouse. They have a girl. Phoenix, we've been trying to identify you for months. Who are you? Quinn Mitchell, computer science student at MIT. Right now, I need you to trace this location and get here fast. I'm going in. Ms. Mitchell, do not engage. We have units en route. Stay in your vehicle. There's no time. If I wait, she's dead. I hung up and approached the warehouse. The building was exactly as I'd mapped it during previous surveillance. 3 entrances, 2 floors, minimal exterior security. The main floor was used for legitimate storage operations during the day. The second floor was where the trafficking activities took place. Vincent's car had given me access through the loading dock. The keycard scanner had been programmed to accept his vehicle's proximity chip, a security flaw I'd discovered weeks earlier. Inside, I could hear voices from the second floor, male voices, and crying. I climbed the metal stairs, each step calculated to avoid noise. At the top, I peered around the corner through a small mirror I'd attached to a telescoping rod, a trick I'd learned from watching surveillance training videos online. There was Destiny, zip-tied to a chair, mascara running down her face. Two men stood over her while a third set up what looked like recording equipment. The setup was disturbingly professional. They'd done this before. Please, Destiny sobbed. I won't tell anyone. I'll quit. I'll leave town. Too late for that, sweetheart, one of them said. You saw too much. The man with the camera was preparing to document her final moments. They were going to make her disappear without a trace, just like they'd done to 43 other girls. Not on my watch. I'd spent months preparing for this moment. I'd studied law enforcement tactics, practiced with non-lethal weapons, and memorized emergency response protocols. But nothing could have prepared me for the surge of adrenaline as I stepped into that room. FBI, nobody move! It was a complete bluff. I wasn't FBI. But in that moment, with my voice projecting authority, I'd learned from watching hours of interrogation videos and holding what looked like official equipment. I became someone else entirely. The three men froze, hands where I can see them. Now, two of them complied immediately. The third, the one with the camera, reached for something in his jacket. I fired the taser, dropping him instantly. Cut her loose, I ordered the remaining two. Now. As one of them moved toward Destiny with shaking hands, I heard sirens in the distance. My emergency protocol had worked. The location tracker, the automated calls to emergency services, the evidence package sent to multiple agencies. Everything I'd programmed months ago was executing perfectly. Who the hell are you? The taller man asked as he cut Destiny's restraints. Before I could answer, the warehouse erupted with activity. Real FBI agents swarmed the building, followed by local police and federal task force members. Agent Morrison was the first to reach the second floor. When he saw me standing over three subdued men with Destiny safe beside me, his expression was pure shock. You're Phoenix? I nodded, suddenly feeling every one of my 19 years. I'm Quinn Mitchell, computer science major at MIT, and I've been building a case against these guys for 6 months. What happened next changed everything. The investigation that followed unraveled a network spanning 12 states. My documentation led to 47 arrests, including 2 police officers, a city council member, and Vincent's entire operation. 17 girls were rescued from various locations I'd identified. But the real revelation came during Vincent's interrogation. When they showed him my evidence, months of recorded conversations, financial transactions, location data, and network analysis, his face went white. The gas station kid did this? He kept repeating. The gas station kid? Agent Morrison called me to the federal building 3 days later. We've never seen anything like this, he said, spreading my files across a conference table. You essentially ran a one-person intelligence operation. The level of detail, the technical sophistication, most of our veteran agents couldn't have done this. I just paid attention, I said. No, you did more than pay attention. You systematically infiltrated and documented a criminal organization while maintaining perfect operational security. Where did you learn this? I shrugged. YouTube. Online courses. I spent a lot of time researching after my friend Cassie disappeared 2 years ago. That's when Agent Morrison leaned forward with interest. Tell me about Cassie. I explained how the whole investigation started, how a missing foster kid had led me down a rabbit hole that exposed an entire trafficking network, how the police had dismissed her disappearance as just another runaway. We found her, Agent Morrison said quietly. My heart stopped. She's alive, currently in protective custody in Nevada. We raided the location from Vincent's files based on your intelligence. She's been asking about you. I broke down crying in that federal conference room. 8 months of investigation, 6 months of undercover work, and countless sleepless nights had been worth it. Cassie was alive. There's something else, Agent Morrison continued. We'd like to offer you an internship. The FBI's cybercrime division has been looking for someone with your skills. 6 months later, I was working in Quantico while finishing my degree remotely. Within a year, I'd helped solve 18 cases involving online criminal networks. But before I could fully transition to federal work, there was unfinished business. Vincent's trial became a media sensation. A 19-year-old college student who'd single-handedly exposed a multi-state trafficking operation. The story captured national attention. During my testimony, Vincent's defense attorney tried to discredit my investigation. Ms. Mitchell, isn't it true that you had no formal training in law enforcement? That's correct. No background in criminal investigation? No, sir. You're just a computer science student who decided to play detective? I looked directly at Vincent, who was sitting at the defense table with his head in his hands. I'm a computer science student who gave a damn about missing girls while law enforcement looked the other way. The prosecutor smiled. Ms. Mitchell, can you describe what the defendant said when he realized you'd been documenting his operation? He asked how a 19-year-old kid could have done this to him. And what was your response? I told him that criminals get comfortable underestimating people. They see age, gender, or social status and assume they know everything about someone's capabilities. Vincent dismissed me as harmless from day one. That assumption cost him everything. Vincent got life in prison without parole. Before his sentencing, he asked to speak with me one final time. How? He said through the glass partition. How did I miss it? You saw what you expected to see, I told him. A broke college kid who needed a job. You never looked deeper. But the cameras, the recordings, when did you? The first week I worked there. I knew something was wrong. The customers who only came at night. The cash transactions. The way you disappear into that back office. It wasn't hard to figure out. He shook his head. A 19-year-old kid. A 19-year-old kid who gave a damn. I corrected him. The irony wasn't lost on me. Vincent had spent years building a criminal empire, convinced that his age, experience, and connections made him untouchable. He'd manipulated police, bought city officials, intimidated witnesses, but he'd been brought down by someone he never saw as a threat, someone he dismissed without a second thought. After Vincent's conviction, I received a letter from Cassie. She was in therapy, working through her trauma, but determined to rebuild her life. "I heard what you did," she wrote. "How you never stopped looking for me, how you risked everything to save other girls. I always knew you were special, but I had no idea how brave you were." Reading her letter, I realized something important. This wasn't just about bringing criminals to justice. It was about giving voice to the voiceless, about refusing to let vulnerable people be discarded and forgotten. 5 years later, I'm a federal agent specializing in human trafficking cases. I still look younger than my age. I still wear hoodies and thick glasses when I'm undercover. And I still watch people underestimate me. The difference is, now I use it professionally. Last month, I was investigating a new trafficking ring operating through high-end restaurants. I went in as a college intern, eager to please, asking naive questions about the business. The owner, a sophisticated woman named Patricia, who ran the operation through a network of seemingly legitimate establishments, took one look at me and decided I was harmless. "Such a sweet girl," she told her partner after our first meeting. "Perfect cover for small deliveries." If she'd done any real research, she would have discovered that the sweet college girl she was planning to exploit had personally dismantled 6 trafficking operations and sent 73 people to prison. But she didn't look deeper. They never do. Patricia's operation was more sophisticated than Vincent's. She recruited women through modeling agencies and talent scouts, promising legitimate entertainment careers. By the time the victims realized what was happening, they were trapped in a web of debt, isolation, and threats. I spent 3 months infiltrating her network. I attended casting calls, befriended other recruits, and slowly mapped the entire operation. Patricia assigned me to handle social media for her talent agency, perfect access to their communication systems and client databases. The breakthrough came when Patricia asked me to deliver contracts to a photo studio across town. Like Vincent's warehouse delivery, she thought she was using me as an innocent courier. Instead, she'd just given me access to their primary processing location. 3 weeks later, when federal agents arrested her entire network, she kept asking the same question Vincent had asked. How did we miss it? Because when people see a young woman with glasses and a nervous smile, they see vulnerability. They see someone to exploit or dismiss. They don't see the federal agent who spent months memorizing their routines, mapping their networks, and building an airtight case against them. Patricia got 25 years. 12 women were rescued from her operation, including 2 who'd been missing for over a year. After Patricia's conviction, Agent Morrison called me into his office. "Quinn, I've been watching your work for 5 years now. You've become one of our most effective agents. But I need to ask, don't you ever get tired of being underestimated?" I thought about his question. "Agent Morrison, being underestimated is the greatest advantage I have. Criminals spend so much energy trying to identify threats that they ignore the people who don't fit their profile of danger. But doesn't it bother you? Being dismissed, talked down to, treated like you're incompetent?" "It used to," I admitted. "But then I realized something. Every time someone underestimates me, they're giving me power. They're lowering their guard. They're making mistakes they'd never make with someone they respected as a threat." He nodded thoughtfully. "There's something else. We've been asked to consult on an international case, a trafficking network operating between the US and Eastern Europe. The assignment would require extensive undercover work in multiple countries." My pulse quickened. This was the kind of case I'd been preparing for my entire career. What would my cover be? Study abroad student, art history major, 23 years old, naive about international travel, easily manipulated. I smiled. "When do we start?" 3 months later, I was in Prague, posing as an American college student, fascinated by European culture. I'd enrolled in actual art history courses to maintain my cover and rented a small apartment near the university. The trafficking network operated through modeling agencies and photography studios, just like Patricia's operation, but on an international scale. They recruited young American women with promises of European modeling careers, then trapped them in a system of exploitation that spanned 6 countries. My contact was a man named Dimitri who ran a talent agency specializing in international opportunities for young American women. When I walked into his office with my portfolio of amateur photography and enthusiastic questions about European modeling, he saw exactly what he expected. Another naive American girl ripe for exploitation. "You have interesting look," he said in broken English, examining photos I'd carefully staged to appear unprofessional but promising. "Very American. Clients like this." Over the next 2 months, Dimitri introduced me to his network. I met photographers who specialized in artistic shoots that gradually became more exploitative. I encountered recruiters who identified vulnerable young women in hostels and student housing. I discovered safe houses where women were held before being transported to final destinations. The operation was massive. Hundreds of women from across the United States and Western Europe were being processed through Prague each year. Some were sold to buyers in Eastern Europe. Others were shipped to Asia or the Middle East. But the most shocking discovery came when I gained access to their client database. These weren't just criminal buyers. The list included politicians, business executives, entertainment industry figures, and even law enforcement officials from multiple countries. This network catered to wealthy, powerful men who could afford to purchase human beings for their personal use. I spent 4 months documenting everything. I created detailed maps of their transportation routes, identified key personnel, and tracked financial flows between countries. I also worked with Interpol and FBI to coordinate simultaneous raids across 6 countries. The operation culminated with me agreeing to be transported to a buyer in Switzerland. Dimitri thought he was finally cashing in on his naive American recruit. Instead, he was walking into the largest international trafficking bust in history. On the night of my scheduled transport, I was driven to a warehouse on the outskirts of Prague. Inside, I found 17 other young women in various stages of preparation for shipment. Some had been drugged, others were restrained, all were terrified. That's when I revealed my true identity. FBI, everyone stay calm. Help is coming. The raid happened exactly as planned. Law enforcement from 6 countries descended on locations simultaneously. Dimitri's entire network was dismantled in a single coordinated operation. 237 women were rescued. 43 traffickers were arrested. 6 high-profile buyers were exposed and prosecuted. When Dimitri realized he'd been played by an American federal agent, his reaction was almost identical to Vincent's. "You are just student," he kept repeating during interrogation. "Just student." "No," I corrected him. "I'm a federal agent who looks like a student. There's a difference." The Prague operation earned me a commendation from the director of the FBI and recognition from Interpol. But more importantly, it led to systematic reforms in how international trafficking cases are investigated. My mom still worries about the dangerous work I do. Last week, she called while I was preparing for another undercover assignment. "Promise me you'll be careful," she said. "Mom, the biggest advantage I have is that criminals never see me coming." "What do you mean?" "I mean they look at me and see a harmless kid. By the time they realize their mistake, it's too late." She was quiet for a moment. "That's terrifying." "For them," I agreed. Last year, I was invited to speak at the International Conference on Human Trafficking. Law enforcement officials from 30 countries attended my presentation on undercover techniques for trafficking investigations. "The most effective weapon against trafficking networks isn't technology or legislation," I told the audience. "It's invisibility. Criminals have spent decades perfecting their ability to identify and neutralize threats, but they've become so focused on obvious dangers that they've forgotten about the quiet ones." I clicked to my next slide, showing photos of all the trafficking operations I'd infiltrated. In every case, success came from being underestimated. When criminals see someone they don't consider threatening, they relax their security. They speak more freely. They make mistakes they'd never make around someone they respected as an adversary. After my presentation, a detective from the Netherlands approached me. "Agent Mitchell, I have to ask, don't you ever want to be recognized for your abilities? Don't you want criminals to fear you?" I thought about his question. "Detective, if criminals feared me, I'd be useless as an undercover agent. The moment they start seeing me as a threat is the moment I lose my effectiveness. Being underestimated isn't a weakness. It's my greatest strength." 6 months ago, I received the most challenging assignment of my career. A trafficking network had infiltrated the upper levels of government in 3 different countries. They were using diplomatic immunity and international legal protections to move victims across borders with impunity. The operation was so sophisticated that traditional law enforcement approaches had failed repeatedly. They needed someone who could get close to high-level government officials without raising suspicion. My cover, a graduate student researching international law for her doctoral dissertation. The assignment required me to attend diplomatic functions, interview government officials, and gain access to restricted documents, all while maintaining the appearance of an earnest young academic focused on theoretical legal questions. It took 8 months to identify the key players and understand how they were exploiting diplomatic channels. Another 6 months to document their methods and gather evidence. The most difficult part wasn't the investigation. It was watching powerful people who should have been protecting vulnerable populations instead profiting from their exploitation. But the hardest moment came when I realized one of the key figures in the network was someone I'd met at law enforcement conferences. A deputy minister who'd given presentations on anti-trafficking efforts, while secretly facilitating the very crimes he claimed to be fighting. When we finally arrested him, his first words were, "You're just a graduate student." "No," I replied. "I'm the federal agent who's been documenting your crimes for 14 months. The look of shock and recognition on his face was identical to every other criminal who'd underestimated me. The diplomatic trafficking case resulted in unprecedented international cooperation. 18 government officials were prosecuted across 3 countries. 47 diplomatic staff members were expelled or reassigned. And most importantly, hundreds of victims were rescued from a network that had seemed untouchable. Today, I'm 31 years old and lead the FBI's International Trafficking Task Force. I've trained agents from over 20 countries in undercover techniques. I've consulted on policy reforms with the United Nations. I've testified before Congress multiple times, but I still look like a graduate student. Last month, while reviewing case files in my office, a new agent asked me something interesting. "Agent Mitchell, you've had incredible success with undercover work, but now that you're well known in law enforcement circles, can you still go undercover effectively?" It was a good question. My photo had appeared in law enforcement publications, and my techniques were taught at training academies worldwide. "Agent Chen," I said, "here's what I've learned. Criminals don't read law enforcement publications, they don't attend training seminars, they live in closed worlds where they only interact with people like themselves." I pulled up photos from my last undercover assignment, a trafficking investigation involving tech companies in Silicon Valley. 6 months ago, I posed as a software engineer looking for freelance work. I attended networking events, submitted job applications, and interviewed with companies involved in the trafficking network. Not one person recognized me. Agent Chen looked surprised. "But your photo has been in major news outlets." "Exactly. And how many criminals do you think read articles about federal law enforcement successes? They're not following FBI press releases or studying agent profiles. They're focused on their own operations." I clicked to the next set of photos, showing the arrest of a tech executive who'd been using his platform to facilitate trafficking. When we arrested him, he said the same thing every other criminal has said. "You're just a software engineer." Agent Chen shook her head in amazement. "It's like they're incapable of learning." "It's not that they can't learn," I explained. "It's that their entire criminal identity is built on being smarter than law enforcement. Admitting they were fooled by someone they considered harmless would destroy their self-image. 3 weeks ago, I received a letter that reminded me why this work matters. It was from a woman named Isabella, one of the victims we'd rescued from the diplomatic trafficking network. "Agent Mitchell," she wrote, "I wanted you to know that I graduated from college last month. I'm starting law school in the fall, focusing on international human rights law. I want to help protect other women like me." She continued, "When I first met you during the rescue operation, I thought you were just another social worker or counselor. You seemed so young, so normal. I had no idea you were the agent who'd spent months building the case that saved my life." Her letter included a photo from her graduation ceremony. She looked strong, confident, hopeful, nothing like the terrified young woman I'd found in that warehouse 3 years ago. "I think about that often," she wrote, "how you could have been anyone, how the person who saved me looked nothing like a hero. It taught me that strength comes in many forms, and the most powerful people are often the ones we least expect." Reading Isabella's letter, I understood something profound about my work. It's not just about being underestimated by criminals. It's about representing hope for people who've been dismissed and overlooked. Every trafficked woman who thought she was powerless. Every missing child whose case was ignored. Every vulnerable person who believed no one cared enough to fight for them. When they see that someone who looks ordinary, someone who could be their sister or daughter or friend, was the one who brought down their captors, it changes how they see themselves and their own potential. The gas station where it all started is a community center now. The building that once housed a trafficking operation now provides services for at-risk youth. There's a small plaque by the entrance that reads, "In memory of all those who were lost, and in honor of those who refused to look away." Sometimes I drive by when I'm visiting Mom. Vincent is serving life in Supermax prison. Patricia got out after 20 years and now works with a victim advocacy organization. Dimitri died in prison 3 years ago. Apparently other inmates don't appreciate traffickers, but their networks have been replaced by new ones. The work continues. Last week, I briefed a new class of undercover agents. "The first thing you need to understand," I told them, "is that being underestimated isn't an accident. It's a strategic advantage you need to cultivate and protect." I clicked to my first slide, a photo of myself at 19, standing behind the gas station counter in my baggy hoodie and thick glasses. This person brought down a trafficking network that had evaded law enforcement for years, not because she was exceptionally skilled or experienced, but because no one saw her as a threat. The agent studied the photo with interest. Your most powerful weapon isn't your gun or your badge or your authority. It's your ability to be invisible, to be dismissed, to be underestimated. A young agent raised her hand. "Agent Mitchell, how do you maintain that advantage as you gain experience and recognition?" "By remembering that criminals see what they expect to see," I answered. "They expect federal agents to look imposing and authoritative. They expect law enforcement to announce itself. They expect their enemies to fit a certain profile." I clicked to the next slide, showing before and after photos from my various undercover assignments. College student, software engineer, graduate researcher, art intern. Each identity was specifically designed to be non-threatening to the criminals I was investigating. Another agent spoke up. "But doesn't it get frustrating? Being talked down to and dismissed?" I smiled. "Every time someone underestimates me, they're handing me an advantage. Every time they dismiss me as harmless, they're making themselves vulnerable. Every time they assume I'm too young or too naive to understand what's happening, they're giving me access to information they'd never share with someone they respected as a threat." The room was silent as the agents absorbed this perspective. "Remember," I continued, "our job isn't to be feared or respected by criminals. Our job is to catch them, and the best way to catch someone is to let them think they're safe." After the briefing, the lead instructor pulled me aside. "Quinn, I've been training agents for 20 years, and I've never seen anyone as effective at undercover work as you. What do you think makes the difference?" I thought about his question. "I think it's because I genuinely don't mind being underestimated. Most people want to be seen as competent and impressive, but for me, being overlooked has become a superpower." "How so?" "When people think you're harmless, they let their guard down. They say things they shouldn't say. They trust you with information they shouldn't share. They make mistakes they'd never make around someone they considered dangerous." I paused, thinking about all the criminals who'd made that mistake. Vincent thought he was using me as a disposable courier. Patricia thought she'd found the perfect naive recruit. Dimitri thought he was exploiting another vulnerable American girl. They all saw weakness where there was actually strength. 6 months later, I'm preparing for what might be my most challenging assignment yet. Intelligence agencies have identified a trafficking network that operates through international aid organizations. They're using humanitarian work as cover to move victims between countries, exploiting the chaos of disaster zones and refugee crises. My cover will be a humanitarian worker with a medical background, volunteering in refugee camps across 3 continents. It's dangerous work. These criminals are operating in areas with minimal law enforcement oversight, using the desperation of displaced populations to hide their crimes. But it's also the perfect environment for someone who specializes in being underestimated. Humanitarian workers are expected to be young, idealistic, and focused on helping others, rather than law enforcement. The criminals won't see me as a threat. They'll see me as someone they can potentially exploit or recruit. They have no idea who I am, and that's exactly how I like it. As I finalize my preparations for this new assignment, I think about all the people who've underestimated me over the years. Vincent, who thought he could use me as a disposable delivery service. Patricia, who saw me as another naive recruit for her exploitation network. Dimitri, who believed he'd found the perfect vulnerable American target. The corrupt government officials who thought they could manipulate a graduate student. All of them made the same fundamental mistake. They judged my capabilities based on my appearance and assumed they understood my motivations based on my cover story. They saw a young woman and thought, victim or tool. They never saw threat or hunter. That blindness cost them everything. Now, as I prepare to go undercover in refugee camps where the most vulnerable people in the world are being preyed upon by criminals who think they're untouchable, I carry with me the knowledge that my greatest strength is still my ability to be invisible. Tomorrow, I'll be just another humanitarian worker with good intentions and limited experience. The traffickers operating in those camps will look at me and see what they always see, someone they can use or ignore. They have no idea that the quiet aid worker documenting supply distributions is actually a federal agent mapping their entire operation. They have no idea that the naive volunteer asking innocent questions about logistics is actually gathering evidence that will bring down their network. They have no idea who I am, but they will. And by the time they figure it out, it will be too late. The 19-year-old gas station clerk who started this journey has become something her younger self never imagined. A weapon disguised as a victim, a hunter disguised as prey, a federal agent disguised as everything criminals expect women like her to be. My "they had no idea who I was" moment didn't end that night in Vincent's gas station. It's still happening. Every day, every case, every criminal who looks at me and sees exactly what I want them to see. And every time they make that mistake, another trafficking network falls, another group of victims goes home, and another set of criminals learns the same lesson Vincent learned in that interrogation room. Never assume the quiet one isn't paying attention. Never assume the young one doesn't understand what's happening. And never ever assume that someone's appearance tells you who they really are. Because the person you dismiss as harmless might be the one building a case against you. The person you think is powerless might be the one with all the power, and the person you never notice might be the one who brings your entire world crashing down. That's my "they had no idea who I was" moment, and it's far from over.